Hi everyone! Today I would like to show you a new feature of the 2023 version, how original ideas coming from input external tables in Simulx are now kept in the outputs. You remember that for individual parameters, covariates, treatments, outputs, and regressors, Simulx can use elements that define the same information for all individuals, or elements that are defined for each individual. In that case, the element is based on an external file with an ID column. This is in particular the case for many elements after importing a project from Simulx or Simulx. Here I have loaded the demo project import from Simulx use EBE's original IDs. It has been created by importing a PopPK Simulx run, and we can see that the imported IDs start at 111. Now I have a PD dataset and I would like to do an exposure response analysis. To do so, I would like to predict the PK concentration at times at which I have a PD measurement and add these values to the PD dataset like this. To do this, I have set up my simulation to use the same treatment as in the Simulx dataset with MLX ADM1 and the EBEs. For the output, I have created a new element from an external file, which contains the time of PD measurements for each individual. I have ticked the shared IDs column to make sure that the EBEs of ID 111 are used together with the treatment of ID 111 and the output time grid of ID 111 too. You can find more information on this topic in the feature of the week number 120. After running, in the Result tab, I now have both the simulated ID and also the original ID. The simulated ID starts at 1, and the original ID indicates from which ID in the input tables the EBE's treatment and output grid comes from. To see the predicted concentration for each individual, I need to go to the Result folder. In the simulation_cc file, I now have two columns, one for the simulated renamed ID and one for the original ID. I could then merge the simulated PK concentrations to the PD dataset using R or Excel, for instance. The original ID column appears also in the other output files. I also have a dedicated file called ID mapping that indicates the correspondence between the simulated ID and the original ID. In addition, the original IDs appear in the Stratify panel of the plots, and it is possible to split by original ID to create one subplot per individual. If I export my run to Simulx or Simulx, the original ID column also appears in the exported dataset. It is not tagged as ID by default, but you can choose to use it by just inverting the two column taggings. So when each simulated ID corresponds to only one original ID, then the original ID column appears everywhere. But there are cases where one simulated ID uses information from several original IDs. This is, for instance, the case if I remove the shared ID tagging here and set a sampling method sample with replacement. In this case, the simulated ID 1 can use the EBEs from ID 120, for instance, and the treatment from individual 125. If I run this, then the original ID does not appear in the result table and plots because there is no one-to-one mapping with an original ID. But the original ID information is available in the outputs in the ID mapping file. There is one column per external element, and I can see how they are combined together to create new IDs. So to recap, when all shared ID boxes are ticked, or there is only one element using an ID column, then original ID appears in result and plot in the GUI, in all output files, exported simulated dataset, data frame returned by the Lixoft connectors, and ID mapping file. In the opposite case, only the ID mapping file is available. Have a nice week!